Today we come to church and we celebrate Easter because it's not about the bunny. It's about the Lamb. The Lamb of God who came, took on our sin, died for us, and rose again to new life. This is the focus of what we do today. The resurrection of Christ. But the resurrection of Christ isn't just some nice historical event that happened 2,000 years ago. It's not like we go along and say, well, we read about George Washington, we read about Abraham Lincoln, we read about Jesus. No, it's not just that, because what Jesus did for us by dying and rising again has a direct impact on our lives here, now, today. The word that kept coming up in my prayer as I was preparing for this homily this week, the word was hope. Jesus' resurrection gives us a reason to hope. And I started thinking about all the reasons why we might not be hoping. All the things that have happened, for instance, since the last time we gathered for Easter. Well, what happened in this parish very shortly after last Easter, actually within a few days, is Father John, who is living here and helping out. He died very suddenly. And through that, we needed hope. And then I was thinking about, throughout the year, the various terrorist shootings and bombings. It seemed like we had a lot this past year. And that priest, this struck my heart, that priest over in France that was killed just for being a priest in the middle of Mass. All these things kind of weighing down on us. And even the drug epidemic here in Pelham. I remember that week, remember when we had, I forget, it was like 6 or 8 deaths from drugs within like 3 days. I got called by the police for an untimely death. Now, I don't think I was the first choice. I think they called up one of the other pastors in town, but he was doing a funeral, so they said, well, he's not available. We'll call Father Vaughn. No, but so they called me up, and I went to go to this house, and the police said, we're not sure the reason for death, but it could be an overdose. So just be aware. They hadn't done the testing yet. And so I go in, and there's this woman who is so distraught. She was broken over the death of her daughter. So broken. Not knowing exactly why it was happening. And she didn't know me from Adam. But I walked in, and she saw my collar. And so I represented God to her. And she was wondering how God could have allowed this to happen. And I let her talk. And we cried together. And we grieved together. And after I was leaving, I know she didn't have the answers to everything. She didn't feel like everything was in place. But she had hope. She had hope. And this is what God can do. He brings hope to broken situations. He brings hope to those times in our lives where we feel absolutely hopeless. What is the darkness of our lives? What is the brokenness? What is the sinfulness? What is the evil that surrounds us? None of that is bigger than that. None of that evil is bigger than what we did to God. We killed God. But my sisters and brothers, that sign of evil that is the cross became, by His great love, now the sign of our hope. We look to the cross. We decorate our houses and our churches with crosses. When I was in the seminary, on all the doorknobs, everywhere, was a cross. The doorknob to my room, the doorknob to my bathroom had a cross. odd. I'm not sure where they found them all. And I didn't think much about it until someone was visiting the seminary who wasn't a Christian and said, looking around saying, why are all there these instruments of torture on all the doorknobs? I was like, oh yeah, that's right. Before it's a sign of love and hope, it was a sign of torture and death. But that's what God's love does. It turns evil on its head. It takes the worst of evils that's in our lives and throws it down and says, see, I've conquered this. I can bring resurrection. I can bring life to all of that. So what is the darkness of our lives? Now, maybe it's not so bad as a drug overdose or other things like that. But we do have that darkness. What are the areas that need to be resurrected? Maybe it's just that we feel like we've lost the vigor for life. Maybe we just feel broken. Maybe our marriage isn't fulfilling us the way we thought that it should have. Maybe our children just give us such a hard time, it's hard to live with. None of your children, of course. But maybe they're just all these struggles. Maybe it's at work. We just lost all of our energy because of the struggles at work. Maybe at school. Who knows? We all have areas of darkness. Areas where we feel like we're beaten down. And the mystery of Easter is that Jesus says, I can bring resurrection to that. I can bring new life to those areas where you feel death. I can bring that new life. We have a parishioner in our parish who's very active, and even though she's what I think she would describe as old, she was always a very active old. And last Sunday she was having a great day. She was in great shape. She was doing wonderful things. And on Monday she ended up in the ER. Her cancer had spread and it was everywhere. And they thought she was going to die that night. She's still alive at this point. But I went to see her a couple times this past week. Second time I went to see her, we actually had a pretty good conversation. And she said, we were talking about death. Because she knows it's coming. And she says, Father, I'm ready. I says, are you afraid? And she says, no, Father. I don't have any fears right now. Yeah, I'm going to miss my family. And, I miss coming to church right now. Because she missed Holy Thursday. But she said, you know what? I'm ready to see Jesus. I want to see Jesus. I've spent my whole life trying to get to know Jesus, and I want to be with Him. I told her she wasn't allowed to go that day. This is what the resurrection of Jesus does. It takes away our fears. It takes away our brokenness. Gives us new life. So my brothers and sisters, I encourage you. What is the area of darkness in our life? Think about, what are the areas that you think is too big for you to handle? What are the areas where maybe you feel like you've just been beaten down so much that you've just died in those areas? Maybe by other people, maybe even you beat yourself up. This is what we did to God. But He resurrected even from that. And no matter how bad our evil is, no matter how dark our darkness is, He will bring resurrection. He will bring light if we but place them in His hands.